You overthink things.
Don't let the polished, clean footage of 1987 fool you. Because Star Trek The Next Generation was at its core a forbidden zone filled with disturbing sexuality and pathological violence, all carefully concealed behind the facade of the Starship Enterprise for nearly 40 years. Did you know there were once shots of Deanna Troi in a revealing outfit so extreme that they had to be destroyed right on set? That there existed a version where Captain Picard was tortured to the point of total psychological collapse? And most shocking of all, a provocative, inverted world where female power did not come from equality, but from dominance and deeply uncomfortable seduction traps. 10 deleted scenes, each one a fragment revealing just how raw and brutal Star Trek might have been if audiences had been allowed to see it in full. 10. Deanna Troi and the sinful dress. The wardrobe shock that nearly shattered a career. In the very first frames of the legendary premiere episode, Encounter at Farpoint, if you're sharp-eyed and perceptive enough, you might notice a strange inconsistency in the appearance of Deanna Troi. Before becoming synonymous with her elegant, form-fitting purple and grey outfits that radiated intellect and composure, this ship's counselor was once the victim of a risky and poorly calculated costume experiment. Designers at the time, guided by a vision of a completely liberated future, dressed her in an ultra-short outfit known as the Scant. The original intention sounded noble to celebrate the human form and the liberation of women in the 24th century, but the moment the studio lights came on, that idea instantly turned into a cinematographic disaster. Marina Sirtis as Deanna Troi, sitting in the command chair right next to Captain Picard, left the entire crew stunned. The lack of fabric created angles and exposures so revealing that no television network in 1987 would have dared to broadcast them on national TV. It didn't just violate the strict decency standards of the time. It also unintentionally undermined the image of a senior officer, a brilliant psychological mind aboard the Enterprise. Production was immediately halted. The costume was ordered to be redesigned overnight to appear more professional and modest. The original footage featuring the Scant outfit was almost entirely destroyed to protect both the show's reputation and the actress, leaving behind only a few fleeting seconds in raw, unedited archives. It stands as an ironic testament, even when imagining a distant future where humanity has conquered the stars, we still struggle awkwardly with deep-seated perceptions about the female body. 9. The sensitive scene between Data and Tasha Yar. When the line between machine and desire blurred, there was a moment in the history of Star Trek The Next Generation that genuinely left audiences of the time flushed and uneasy when the android Data and security chief, Tasha Yar, formed an unusual connection under the influence of the polywater virus. In the official broadcast, what we see is a suggestive, yet restrained, and somewhat romantic scene shaped to fit standard television norms. But in the smoky editing rooms of the 1980s, the truth was far more raw and intense. The original cut of this scene contained far more daring camera angles and explicitly suggestive dialogue. It wasn't merely a steamy moment, it was a psychological dissection of instinctive curiosity within an artificial mind. The studio intervened aggressively, slicing the footage without mercy, because they understood that Star Trek had to remain a show for all audiences, one where adult impulses could not overshadow the higher ideals of human evolution. Yet this removal unintentionally erased a deeply human and painful layer in Data's journey to understand what it means to have a soul. Had those scenes remained, we would see a very different Data. Not an innocent machine learning to be human, but a being filled with longing, constantly restrained and tormented by the ethical codes imposed upon him by human society. Those deleted moments are the missing fragments of a suppressed rebellious identity cut away in the editing room before it could fully exist. 8. Picard's extreme psychological torture in Chain of Command Part 2. There are 4 lights, 4 simple lights, and a line that has become an immortal symbol of resilience, of unbreakable pride in the face of oppression. But to earn that moment on screen, our captain endured a true hell that broadcasters deliberately softened to protect audiences. In the original cut of Chain of Command Part 2, the psychological and physical torture inflicted by the Cardassian interrogator was longer, more brutal, and far more dehumanizing. The version we've watched for decades was in reality toned down to reduce its emotional shock. But in the sealed footage, we see a Picard who is completely shattered, no longer the composed commander with a steel gaze, but an aging man trembling. His body weakened, his spirit nearly crushed under unbearable suffering. Producers at the time feared that if they revealed the total breakdown of such an iconic figure, the audience's belief in humanity's strength and superiority within the Star Trek universe would collapse along with him. So they chose to cut away the most agonizing screams, the moments where Picard nearly gave in, preserving instead a clean legend who never truly falls. But by erasing those scars, they also erased a crucial truth. Picard's soul was torn apart in that dark interrogation chamber. Those deleted scenes are not just about violence, they are a haunting reminder of the terrible price of freedom and truth. 7. Angel 1. The truth about Riker's sealed seductive scenes. Angel 1 was a bold experimental episode that placed the Enterprise crew in an inverted world. One where women held absolute power over life and death, and men existed merely as subordinates and ornaments. In the original script, the interactions between Commander Riker and the female leaders of this planet went far beyond polite flirtation or courteous smiles. The dialogue was layered with overt sexual undertones, and the seduction sequences were filmed in a far more intense and direct manner, designed to emphasize the complete reversal of social norms and gender power dynamics of the time. However, editors were forced to heavily cut these excessive flirting moments just before the episode aired. The reason wasn't only about censoring sensitive imagery, but also because the theme of a female-dominated society was already controversial and divisive for audiences in the 1980s. Producers feared that if the sensual elements were pushed too far, the political message about equality and the reflection of gender injustice would be overshadowed by unnecessary scandal. Riker, originally portrayed as a charming womanizer caught in the seductive trap of powerful women, was re-edited to appear more restrained and distant. This editing decision unintentionally concealed a far more provocative version of Angel 1, an episode that sought to use discomfort and sensual tension to challenge traditional moral values and pose a difficult question. Would we truly accept reality if power rested in the hands of the so-called weaker gender? 6. The inhumane dissection. When Data became the victim of disturbing experiments, The Measure of a Man is often celebrated as one of the philosophical peaks of the entire series, where Data's rights are examined in a legal battle to define what constitutes a sentient being. But in the original cut, over 13 minutes longer, and rarely seen, the word dissection takes on a far more literal, horrifying meaning. There were close-up sequences of Data being taken apart, not like dismantling an ordinary machine, but more like a haunting live surgery performed on a human body. The filmmakers staged these scenes with cold metallic tones and sterile laboratory lighting, emphasizing Data's absolute isolation as his internal components. Mechanical parts and intricate circuitry were laid bare. Close-up shots of his arm being removed or the joints in his neck being separated created an unsettling sense of violation for the viewer. The studio ultimately chose to significantly trim these sequences after realizing a disturbing truth. If audiences witnessed this intrusion in full, Data would no longer be seen as a Starfleet officer, but as a victim of scientific abuse. The horror lies in the paradox. Data cannot feel pain yet. his lifeless, motionless gaze on the operating table, evokes a chilling reminder of inhumane experiments throughout human history. It was an image too heavy, too disturbing for a science fiction series that carried a mission of teaching empathy and moral reflection. 5. The conspiracy tragedy. The blood-soaked footage deemed a stain on television. To this day, Conspiracy remains one of the most haunting episodes for generations of Star Trek fans. The moment when a grotesque parasite bursts out of Remmick's shattered chest is one of the most horrifying scenes in television history. But few realise that the version you saw on TV was still a toned-down version of what was originally filmed. Under the harsh lights of the set, the makeup and special effects team had created a sequence of extreme visceral violence, flesh and bone, exploding in a literal sense, fake blood spraying violently, and the parasite's convulsions depicted in graphic, slimy, nauseating detail. When studio executives reviewed this raw, blood-drenched cut, they were genuinely shocked. They understood that if the scene were left intact, the episode would immediately receive an R rating and be banned from broadcast on family-oriented television networks. An emergency round of editing followed, much to the disappointment of the production team, leaving behind only enough imagery for audiences to understand what was happening without making them physically sick in front of their screens. Even with most of its brutality removed, the lingering impact remains a testament to a rare moment when Star Trek dared to push beyond all safe boundaries and step into the realm of extreme body horror before being pulled back into the safer confines of 1980s television. 4. Final mission. The farewell that was stolen from Wesley Crusher. Wesley Crusher's departure in the episode Final Mission always left an oddly hollow feeling for those who had followed the Enterprise since its earliest days. The gifted teenager, once the centre of so much debate, left his home among the stars for Starfleet Academy in a rushed, almost abrupt manner, buried within the urgency of a tense rescue mission. But in the deleted footage, this was not a hurried exit, it was a farewell filled with the weight of growth and gratitude. The original cut included deeply emotional moments where Wesley stood before each key member of the crew, from Geordi and Data to his mother, Dr. Beverly Crusher, to say a true goodbye. These were rare glimpses of a Wesley no longer seen as the troublesome kid or the genius saviour, so often criticised, but as a young man trembling, yet determined on the threshold of adulthood. He looked back at the corridors where he had grown up, at the mentors who had taught him courage and sacrifice. The tears and tightly held embraces in these deleted scenes carried immense symbolic weight, representing a generational transition aboard the Enterprise. However, the studio chose to remove most of these sequences to preserve the pacing of the action and rescue storyline. That decision inadvertently reduced the farewell of a character central to 4 seasons into something dry, abrupt, and emotionally underwhelming, almost dismissive of the audience's connection to him. 3. Q. Who. The brutal nature and nightmare of the Borg. When the Borg first appeared in Q. Who, the science fiction world was forced to redefine what absolute fear truly meant. Yet the version shown on screen was still a relatively restrained, conventional sci-fi confrontation. In the raw, unedited cuts, the Borg's arrival was a genuine survival horror nightmare, a soulless mechanical spectre. Scenes of Borg drones boarding and attacking the Enterprise crew were filmed with a level of brutality and violence far beyond the standards of late 1980s television. The studio ultimately removed close-up depictions of Borg drones coldly eliminating and assimilating their victims. In the dark corridors of the ship, mechanical limbs pierced through uniforms and screams were silenced by the indifferent efficiency of machines' imagery, far too disturbing for prime-time broadcast. Producers feared that such grotesque intensity would overshadow the philosophical core of Star Trek. But in truth, toning down the horror weakened the very message that the entity Q sought to deliver, that the universe is not only filled with beautiful worlds and peaceful diplomacy, but also with entities so cold, so inhuman and so merciless that the human mind can barely comprehend them. The original version of Q. Who could have been a true survival horror story. One where humanity is forced to confront its own fragility in the face of an empire that has no concept of empathy. 2. The child behind the steel mask of Jean-Luc Picard. In the original script of the Season 2 premiere, there existed a hauntingly quiet scene at the edge of the Enterprise where distant starlight bore witness to a rare moment of vulnerability. In that moment, Captain Picard shed his usual rigid composure and confessed to Riker the profound loneliness of command. He spoke of the heavy cost of responsibility of standing above everyone, yet belonging to no one. It was the most human, most unguarded version of Picard we could have ever seen throughout the series. However, the producers were deeply concerned that such a scene would weaken the image of the Iron Captain they were carefully constructing. They wanted a Picard who was always decisive, a symbol of near perfection with no room for doubt or personal vulnerability. By cutting this introspective dialogue, they preserved the image of a flawless Starfleet icon in the public eye, but at the cost of something far more meaningful. They took away from the audience a rare chance to truly understand the man behind the uniform, someone who had sacrificed personal happiness, ordinary human connections, and emotional intimacy for the safety of an entire galaxy. Those deleted moments were like a quiet sigh from a crownless king hidden away in the editing room to maintain the illusion of a legend who never tires, never falters, and never feels alone. His possession nightmare. When Deanna Troi became a demon in the band Cut, the final piece, and the most haunting entry on this list, is the episode Power Play, where we witness Deanna Troi being possessed by an ancient spiritual entity. In the unfiltered original cuts, Troi's expressions and violent behaviour during possession were disturbingly intense beyond belief. This was no longer a standard science fiction performance, it became a ferocious transformation filled with blood-curdling screams and attacks on her crewmates that echoed the tone of classic exorcism films. Every glance, every movement from Marina Sirtis in the original footage radiated a chilling cruelty. The studio had to intervene heavily to tone down the horror of this sequence, as they were determined not to turn a family-friendly sci-fi series into a full-fledged horror production. While these edits kept the episode within safe boundaries, they also stripped away the raw realism of how devastating such an entity could be to the human mind. Had those haunting scenes remained intact, we might have witnessed a truly unforgettable performance, one that was painful, raw, and eerily hypnotic, rather than a version refined for mass comfort. It was a moment when Star Trek truly touched the edge of darkness before being pulled back into the safe, polished light of 1990s television standards. Cinema at times is like a ship drifting through the void. What we see is only the light from distant stars, while the vast darkness behind them holds the most human truths. These deleted scenes do not tarnish the legacy of the next generation. If anything, they remind us that to reach the ideals of the future humanity must first confront the darkest parts of itself. Even within the editing room, if you had the choice, which uncut episode would you want to see the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments so we can uncover it together. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss the next hidden chapters of cinematic memory.